What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another breaking news live stream here on Met Central. As the New York Mets have signed Jorge Polanco to a 2-year deal worth $40 million total, making it a $20 million AAV deal. As Jeff Passan said, it is looking like Jorge Polanco is going to be the answer at first base slash DH for this Mets squad. That, of course, needs to replace the likes of Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, with all of them leaving in free agency. So there's still obviously a lot of holes that need to be addressed on the squad, but the Mets add a very solid bat, which we are going to talk about. Matt will be joining me shortly. But before we jump into everything, talking about Jorge Polanco, talking about the fit, talking about what this Mets squad needs to do going forward in terms of bolstering the roster, please be sure to leave a like on your way into the show here. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel, especially if you're Met fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live here on Met Central. Now, I am going to sit here and say right off the rip, I'm a huge fan of this deal. I have liked Jorge Polanco for quite a bit now. He's had a couple of down years in his career. Like you look at 2020, not a great season for him. You look at 2024, really not a great season for him. But outside of those, you look at a lot of his seasons, and he has just been a very solid, consistent hitter that will give you a 260 average. He's going to hover around that 800 OPS range and just give you a respectable bat. He'll give you probably north of 20 bombs. Now, the thing that does worry me with Jorge Polanco is there appears to be an injury issue here because if you look at his game logs, 138 games played in 2025. I don't know if there was an injury there or just getting days off. 118 the year prior, 80 in 2023, really not good. In 2022, 104. Before that, though, I mean, he logged 3 consecutive seasons of being healthy. I'd have to look at the injury track record to see if those are like injuries that could reoccur. But nonetheless, I am a fan of this because you're adding yourself a guy that could actually DH and have some power. Because over the past few years, it's been Starling Marte, it's been Jesse Winker. I mean, ever since the DH has been implemented into the National League, the Mets have treated the position like such a joke between all the platoons they've done. Whether you look at their first set of platoon with JD Davis and Dom Smith, which we thought was going to be good after JD Davis had a really good 2019 season. And Dom Smith, while he has not been necessarily a consistent hitter, but in terms of just, you look at the fact that, um, you thought the potential was there either way, and that was your platoon. You go to Vogelback and Ruff in 2022 when they replaced those guys. Then you have Vogelback and Tommy Pham getting DH reps. And then, I mean, JD Martinez at age 50,000 years old, platooning with Jesse Winker, and that just wasn't as good, especially because those guys weren't healthy enough. So we finally get ourselves here a guy that could DH or play first base. I'm inclined to think that they are going to DH Polanco, though, because when you look at his defense, not the greatest defender. He could play a bit of second base, and maybe that's what dragged down a lot of his OAA and just other fielding numbers is playing second base. And I believe he even played a bit of shortstop at points this year as well. So I would be more inclined to think he's going to be the DH, considering there are still a couple first basemen on the market. Whether you're talking about trading for Wilson Contreras and the Cardinals might pay down some of that contract, whether you look at, Murakami, if he comes in, then they take a flyer on him. Whether you look at Yandy Diaz, who's potentially going to be traded at some point this offseason. So if you are bringing him into DH and then you're pairing him with a Contreras, with a Yandy Diaz, with a Murakami, to me, I'm a huge fan of that because you're making the lineup deeper. And that is something that, for me, and now that it's been a couple of days to sit here and reflect on Pete Alonso walking, Edwin Diaz walking, Brandon Nimmo being traded, even though, I never really, no offense to Brandon Nimmo, but I never really had like a strong feeling like, oh, I'm depressed about him being out the door. I'm kind of glad with that contract getting out of it. But now that I've had a few days to reflect, we need to sit here and ask ourselves, would we rather a team that keeps Pete Alonso and continues to shop in the B tier free agent class and signing these guys to contracts they're going to regret down the road? Or would you rather them shop in this category to make the team deeper? And then when the premier free agents, the A tier free agents hit the market, this is where I will hold the front office accountable. You have to be the highest bidder no matter who the free agent is when the A tier free agents hit the market. If you lose Scooble to the Dodgers next year, it better not be because you're not the highest bidder. So when you combine all that, you guys could tell me, and I'm going to bring Matt in, and he'll, of course, give his opinion to tell me. But would you rather have Pete Alonso at 31 million AAV, or would you rather have Polanco and Contreras potentially, or Polanco and Yandy Diaz potentially, and make this team deeper? And the Moneyball saying we'll recreate the 40 home runs, we'll recreate the 126 RBIs because we're building a deeper squad here.
Oh, for me, and listen, first of all, hopefully everyone's had a good day so far. I'm glad to be on here. Glad to finally talk about a signing because it's been a couple weeks since the Devil Williams signing, and I know we've gone through a bit of a stretchy, kind of a long stretch of bad news lately, but we're here, and yeah, like I said, finally a good signing to talk about. But yeah, just to build off that, for me personally, look, everybody wants to have a star-filled team, right? From top to bottom, right? Everyone wants to be the Dodgers, right? But like we've been talking about for the past couple weeks, like what Carson was saying yesterday on his show on Mets Weekly, if you guys didn't check that out, make sure you guys do. If you want to be the Dodgers, you can't afford to give out contracts to B-tier players. And listen, I get it. We all love Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso is a fan favorite Met. He had plenty of great opportunities here. But like Carson has stated many times, would the Dodgers have given that contract to Pete Alonso? And the answer is simply no. What the Dodgers have done is, and yes, it's taken time, and yes, I get it. We want instant success right away. Like I 100% get that. But in order to get that success, and in order to get that sustainable success, like what the Dodgers have done over the past decade, is they pick and choose correctly who those guys that they spend the money is on. Because let's not forget, like, the Mets have spent plenty of money over the past couple years. Like, they spent money on Scherzer, they spent money on Verlander, they spent money on Marte, Juan Soto. But let's be honest, not all that money was spent correctly. And there's a difference between spending money and spending money correctly. So, and listen, I get that not everyone is in love with David Stearns right now. I get that he's not the most liked person in New York, and maybe that's putting it nicely right now. But what he is doing right now, he is taking a core, which we can all agree because we've talked about it for the past couple of years, and we've talked about it for the past couple months since this team's collapsed in the second half. We said that this team needs a major shakeup, and he's done it. And listen, I get, like I said, I get that people don't like necessarily that the fan favorites are gone, but again, you look at it, you already know that this team and this core was not good enough to win. So why rerun it back with different surrounding pieces or around those core guys? No, it was time to change, and I want to give this a shot. Like I really do. For me though, and like we talked about it on the last show, which we were talking about the Pete Alonso signing, if you're going to stick to a plan, and if this is David Stern's plan, I want you to stick to it. I want you to commit to it, and I don't want there to be any deviation. And if what we're going to do is we're going to surround guys like Juan Soto, we're going to surround Francisco Lindor with quality depth like Jorge Polanco, and maybe a guy like Wilson Contreras, or maybe a guy like Yandy Diaz, that is the type of depth that I want to surround those guys. And I want to build a deeper lineup than just having BT free agents on big money, because that's not going to work. Now, we kind of got a little bit scared because we heard the rumors that maybe the Mets' plan at first base was going to be a Paul Goldschmidt and Jeff McNeil platoon, which we all said, you better not go anywhere near that type of platoon. And so far, it looks like that Stearns is sticking to the plan of adding quality depth around the star players that are left on this roster. And Jorge Polanco, he's the first move. Hopefully there's a couple more that are in line to change the dynamic. Yeah, to the next in a series of culture-changing moves. And listen, like I said, if Polanco is the first one, that's great. But they still got plenty of work to do. But so far, and like I said, we're gonna dive deeper into the signing. But I like this signing off the bat so far.
Yeah, and I also really like the fact that you add another switch hitter into this lineup too, because the whole concern I had is like, how are you going to balance the lefties and the righties out? So now you add a guy that's a switch hitter, and to me, this is like the perfect guy to either hit. I don't know where ideal. I think ideally you want him hitting second or fifth in the lineup, but again, this is to the point where this is going to be Lindor and Soto's team, and you're making it deeper. And like you said, it really comes to a point where you have to ask yourself, do you continue to run back the same thing you've done for 7 years and it doesn't work? You know it doesn't work because all this talk about, oh, if you want to be the Dodgers, you got to overpay these guys to compete with them. Well, they didn't beat the Dodgers in 2024 with Pete Alonso. And if you're going to lose them anyway, I'd rather try something new and see if you could find lightning in a bottle this way with making a deeper team, because how many times have we complained that you have a black hole 5 through 9 in the lineup? How many times have we complained that these star players, quote unquote, do not shine in the big moments? Remember that 0 for 70 stretch that these guys had, the top four, the Fab Four, or whatever? So at the end of the day, if you could build a lineup where the line keeps moving, which this is what Ray is saying, that you want a lineup that keeps moving, scoring runs. Love the home runs, but with the right lineup, it can be done. And I think you have to realize too, and I'm not going to sit here and deny what I said a few days ago, where it's like I don't love the whole we have to be budging on 3 years thing. I still don't love it with certain situations. Like I think with Edwin Diaz, you should have won a fourth year. But with certain guys, the reason we're in this predicament is because they overpaid guys to long term. I mean, look at the Starling Marte deal, for example. Giving him a 4 year deal was a huge mistake. And after that first year, just never the same player. So, and Jeff McNeil right now, you have him, you sign him to what, 4 or 5 year deal. And we're stuck with him right now. And it's very annoying. And we're trying to offload him. So if you could build a lineup where again it is deeper and you're not tied to these guys long term, I would much rather that than what we've had the past few years where it's like we need the white bear to come on in and save the day. He's the knight in shining armor to save the day and the offense runs through him. Would you rather that, or would you rather let's get guys that could be league average to above league average to surround Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, so you're not top heavy? Where this past year, Mark Vientos below league average, Jeff McNeil below league average, Alvarez most of the year below league average, Brett Beatty streaky. It was time for this core to be broken up, and at the end of the day, my frustration with the Alonso thing wasn't even Pete leaving. It was what is the backup plan? Because I was scared we were going in a direction where this is going to be a mini rebuild. But I'm starting to understand the vision. And that's where I am not frustrated anymore. Because I understand, let's get these veterans to short term deals that we could compete with to surround Soto and Lindor. We could infuse the prospects into this lineup as we go along. And if we don't hit on these prospects, we could supplement them with more of these kind of Polancos of the world and these guys on these short-term deals. But it runs through Lindor and Soto now.
Yeah, 100%. And it's kind of like what we were talking about on the last show where we were talking about Pete leaving. I think the most appropriate plan, at least for now, that's what it's looking like, is because like we talked about, you don't simply just want to surround Soto and Lindor with like older veterans per se, because the chance of you hitting on every single veteran, it's not likely. But then like we also brought up the point, okay, like there's other ways to do it. Like for example, you could surround these guys simply with the younger prospects and the rookies. But again, that's a very dangerous game you're playing because how many of these rookie slash prospects are you exactly going to hit on? Like not everyone is exactly going to hit up there to the potential. But the nice healthy balance was okay. Let's bring along the prospects. Let's give a guy like Carson Benz, Jet Williams, Jonah Tong, Nolan McLean. Let's give these guys a fair opportunity to come in and get themselves acclimatized to the major league level, and let's also supplement these guys with older veterans as well who have been there, done that. And I mean the prime example is like for example, like you go back a couple weeks ago to the Marcus Semien trade. Like they bring in Marcus Semien, a guy that's older and he's experienced. He's a leader. He's known as one of the better veteran leaders in clubhouses in all of Major League Baseball and played a large part in the Rangers' run to a 23 World Series. That's a guy who can help some of the younger prospects become quicker acclimatized to the Major League level. And you also look at a guy like Jorge Polanco, a guy who's 32 years old, a guy who's experienced, a guy who played a major role in the Mariners getting to an ALCS Game 7 last year. They were a game away from getting to the World Series. And I like the fit of Polanco for a number of reasons. One, he's versatile, so he could play all over the infield. Shortstop, second base. Obviously, the Mets are gonna try to play him at first base a little bit, which I assume that the Mets are also going to get another first baseman / DH next to Jorge Polanco, because at least from the tweets that I've seen, Jorge Polanco has not actually played an inning at the major league level at first base. So I would assume that Stearns is just not going to throw him in right away at first base. Like, I'm sure he's going to get another person next to him. And obviously, we've seen the rumors as well with Wilson Contreras being linked, Ryan O'Hearn being linked. I mentioned before, Yandy Diaz could also play first base as well if the Mets want to trade for him. So, and like I said, because obviously you have to fill two spots as well with DH and first base. Obviously, Polanco's not going to play both those positions in one game. So you're going to have another option to supplement Polanco along, and split time with him at DH and first base, which, like I said, if that's going to be your platoon there at DH and first base, I rather it a lot more than Jeff McNeil and Paul Goldschmidt, who both have shown that they are just not at their best anymore and they're past their prime. But a couple other things I do like with Jorge Polanco, and obviously we're gonna dive deeper into it a little bit more. But again, Polanco, what's something that we've wanted this Mets team to do, especially going into this offseason, and something that we criticized this team a lot for last year, especially with the hitting approach. Jorge Polanco pulls the ball, similar to Marcus Semien. And again, this is a guy that's going to fit the Jeff Albert, Troy Snitker philosophy. And again, what's another thing we criticized the Mets for last year? The fact that they couldn't hit fastballs. You look at Jorge Polanco's stats on hitting fastballs last year: 276 batting average, expected 282, 539 slugging, expected 504 slugging. So again, this and only a 13.3% whiff rate. So this is a guy that knows how to sit on fastballs and he knows how to hit fastballs as well. And even in the prior years, 259 batting average, 442 slugging. So again, a guy that's going to pull the ball and who's also going to look to do damage as well. And like you also mentioned, I like the fact that he's a switch hitter, because again, it just adds another layer and another dimension to this lineup, which we know over the past couple of years has been a bit more lefty heavy. And that's something that we've said coming into this offseason, that the Mets kind of had to expand their lineup a little bit more in terms of lefty, righty, and switch hitters.
It's so weird because I'm looking at Baseball Reference. It says he has a game at first base, but no innings played, which is not making sense unless they like shifted him over for one at bat and then like moved him back. That must be it. I don't know what it is, but yeah, when I saw this signing and I looked at his Savant page, I'm like, this is the DH. Like, there's no way that they're having Polanco play the field. But the nice part is, heaven forbid you need him to. He could play a little bit of second base, could play a little bit of third base if you need to get guys off their feet, which David Stern said, I want to add positional versatility to this team as well. So you add another guy where primarily a DH, but at least he could play the field. And it's not like Starling Marte where he's going to die if you put him out there to field for an inning or a game. And because that was annoying. You put Marte in the field and it's a spring training game. You got to pull him after 3 or 4 innings. But nonetheless, I'm really glad that they're going this route of getting guys that fit a certain mold, like you said, where you're getting a guy that pulls the ball. The thing that is interesting to me, though, is because my brother was pointing this out, I want to fact check it, and even just look at his hit chart, it seems like he was better as a lefty this past year, which I love that because that means Jeff McNeil is out the freaking door if that's the case. Also, if you want to hear another positive with Jorge Polanco here, his numbers with runners on base this year. He had 6 bombs, 52 RBIs, 16 walks, hit 337 um, with men in scoring position this past year. What is something we complained about all of this past year? Producing with runners in scoring position. Complained about the entire year. He had 173 WRC plus with runners in scoring position, 985 OPS. There's a guy that knows how to rise to the occasion here. Playoff numbers this past year weren't that great, to be honest with you, but he did have a couple of clutch moments there in the playoffs, if you remember. So I like this addition for a multitude of reasons, but I'll see what you guys are saying in the chat about this ad. And listen, I get it that not everyone's going to be happy that Pete Alonso's gone, that he's in the orange now. He's a Cheeto dust bear now instead of a polar bear. And it's unfortunate to lose a guy that has been here as long as he has. But at the end of the day, we're fans and all we can do at this point is hope that Stearns knows what he's doing. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and say anyone's wrong if they don't have faith in him. Because at the end of the day, there's been a couple of rough moves. But this is where now, like Matt said the last live stream we did, he's got to prove himself. And this could be something that if he fucks us up, he's probably not going to get another job in baseball again. So we'll see how this pans out. But let me get to the comments. Ray saying a good get. Polanco could hit. Yes, he absolutely can. This tells me either Vientos or McNeil is gone. Also not too sure about the defensive fit. I think both those guys are gone at this rate.
Yeah.
When you look at the fact that Polanco's better from the left side, I think that's kind of the writing on the wall for McNeil. When you look at the fact that Vientos is that same mold where he can't play a position, and Brett Beatty's the better third baseman, arguably, because he could play defense there. And then Polanco could play the field and DH. I think Vientos is gone at this rate. But we'll see. Polanco's a play first, but Morosi linked the Mets to Murakami. Yes, so that's why I think, and Matt said the same thing. I think that this is going to be, we'll let him play a bit of first base if we need to, but we're going to go and get a Yandy Diaz still, or we're going to get a Murakami or a Contreras, who they've been linked to.
Yeah, I'm still not comfortable with Murakami per se. I know things could change, but I'm scared off by all, by all the rumors, and like we've said before, like if the Mets are going down this path where they're going to supplement Soto and Lindor with quality veterans, I would rather, and I know that Murakami is a baseball veteran per se because he's played for a long time in Japan, but I'd rather have the proven major league veterans over a huge question like Murakami. And listen, there's a chance that Murakami could come here and he could absolutely hit the ground running and boom. I would just, for where the Mets are going right now, I would rather take the safer option than going with Murakami, which is a wild card right now. Like the only way I'd be fine with Murakami right now is if like the Mets were in a Dodger position right now where they already have proven talent, already the diamond, and you could, take like a spot like first base per se and say, okay, let's take a chance with a guy like Murakami because at least we know if he doesn't work out, we at least have a stacked lineup already from 1 through 8. But like I said, where the Mets are right now, and the fact that they need quality veterans to supplement their star talent as along with their rookies and their prospects as well, I would just stay away from Murakami personally.
Let me ask this. Does your opinion change if they're able to acquire a Bellinger or Tucker in free agency and Murakami takes a short-term deal?
Tucker, yes. Bellinger, 50-50 on. Because because for me, even like, and I know Polanco doesn't necessarily grid out well at first base, but I mean, like we just moved off of Pete, and I get that Alonso took a huge deal with Baltimore, 5 years, 155. He's being paid $31 million a year. Like Murakami's not going to get that type of deal, but I would just, for me, because we know that Murakami is one of his weaknesses was defense, especially at first base. So I'm not sure exactly why the Mets would necessarily want Murakami. If they end up signing him, listen, I'm going to give him a shot. But I'm just saying, for me, I'm not too comfortable with signing Murakami. I would rather go get a Contreras, go get a Yandy Diaz, go get a Ryan O'Hearn. Like I said, for me, I want a proven guy, a proven veteran at first base to pair along with Jorge Polanco.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, like the whole point is, you got to make the lineup deeper. So I get it from that perspective. 20 mil a year though. He was on 8 million last season. I know he hit 2 home runs off Scooble, but seems a bit expensive. It's probably more expensive because you're signing him to 2 years. And to me, if you're asking the question, would you rather have him at 2 years, 20 million, or space that out to 10 million for 4 years? I know 10 million doesn't sound like a lot, but those last 2 years could be an albatross. And you're looking at another Jeff McNeil contract where that's part of why the Mets are in this mess right now, is because of the fact that you've had these contracts that have aged poorly. You couldn't get a real DH last year because Marte was signed to an albatross of a deal. You couldn't upgrade your infield defense because Jeff McNeil was on an albatross of a deal. So I get it from that perspective. Like, I'm not going to sit here and, disagree that 20 million is a lot for Polanco. It definitely is a slight overpay on the AAV, but I would rather the 2 years to where you're not forced to package him with a prospect or package him with money to get out of this deal down the road, like you've been with a couple of these other contracts, like you're probably going to have to do with McNeil. That's just my
Yeah,
opinion there.
yeah, and it's also like, so like you're getting Polanco, right? Obviously 2 years, which like again I'm fine with, because I'd rather pay a bit more in terms of AAV up front than give them the years and space out and space out the money and space out the AAV. But it's also, you're bridging towards your younger players, because as well,
Yeah.
if you get a guy like Wilson Contreras, who's also in a 2 year deal plus a third year I think it's a team option. Yeah, it's a team option. So if it works out, obviously you could get Contreras for another year. But let's say if those two, it's time to move on from them. Okay, you can move on from them, and by the time we get to 2 years, if a guy like Ryan Clifford is ready to take over the first base role, now you could slide Ryan Clifford there, and he's going to be on a cheaper first base contract. I also looked maybe like ahead to free agency in 2028, who's going to be a free agent at first base, but because I thought maybe they could plan ahead for these cheaper short-term deals and then strike hot to get like an A-type first baseman. But I looked at it. You're going to have a 39-year-old Freddie Freeman, Christian Walker, Contreras is going to be available, and Yandy Diaz is available. So obviously there's no big-time free agent first baseman who's going to be available. So my guess, like I said, is they're going to be looking to get through these next 2 years while supplementing, like I said, getting a quality veteran, and then hopefully getting to bridging that gap to Clifford by the time he's ready to take over the reins at first base full time.
Yeah. That's really what it's about, is just like bridging to these prospects along with it. Will saying Polanco fits starts mold, love the type. Uh Change had to happen. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it would be wrong for me to sit here and complain about something I asked for at the end of the year. At the end of the year, I said two of these guys from the Fab Four, quote unquote, need to go. And it wasn't going to be Soto. Not that I wanted it to be Soto, but I was just saying, you have to move on from two of these quote unquote core guys. To me, it needed to be Alonso and Nimmo, and they moved on. 4 years wouldn't have kept Diaz. He wanted to leave. We'll never know. I just think they should have offered the fourth year. And if you turn down at that point a fourth year, then you just throw your arms up and say, oh, well, like we did the best we could. That's where my frustration is, more than the fact that, again, if he left for that 3 year deal and the Mets offered 4 years, the Mets did everything they could at that point.
And there were actually reports, I believe it was from John Heyman. Again, I don't know if this is like 100% correct. I know Heyman's usually pretty much spot on, because I mean, usually he's Boris's mouthpiece, but he at least said, and like I said, I think it was Heyman, that Diaz actually had 4 year offers on the table, and he went to the Dodgers. So maybe if the Mets did offer the 4 years, maybe he still would have picked the Dodgers. I wouldn't blame them personally, because they give you the best chance to win. But to me, I would have just been a bit more aggressive with Diaz and given him that 4th year right away because again, people are obviously mad at Stearns with the whole Pete Alonso Edwin Diaz thing, but you have to separate the Alonso one and the Diaz one. They are two separate ones because
Yeah.
Stearns wanted no part of Pete Alonso unless it was on a 3-year deal, and that's where the Mets didn't even offer him a deal because they knew he was going to get 5 years from the Orioles. And like I said, he signed with it. With Diaz, they simply were just too cute with the negotiations, and the Dodgers basically got a leg up on them, and Diaz ended up walking away. So like I said, it's two different situations with Diaz and Alonso.
Yeah. And like the thing is, you brought up the point that other teams offered like 4 or 5 years on a deal. It's different if it's the Mets doing it, is what my feeling still is. So that's where I blame all parties. So all three, the Mets or like Cohen, Stearns, and Diaz. But again, what's done is done, and the Mets are linked to Mason Miller, which that would be a really good. I knew that was coming. Which that would be a really great replacement. That is the second best closer in the game. So if not the best 1A, 1B situation with Diaz. So hey, all is forgiven if they could find a way to do that. You make a deeper lineup, get Mason Miller in this pen and add a starter or two. Then it's a lot of work. We have a lot of checkpoints still to cross. But opening day is months away. It is not tomorrow. Diaz took the easy way out. Dude never came back to the Mets. The Dodgers would have matched the offer again. If that's the case, it is what it is. I don't really know what else to say in that regard. Solid move. Need more. Yeah, they obviously still have a lot of work to do because if we're going to make a deeper lineup, adding just Jorge Polanco and calling it an off season does not make the lineup deeper than what it was last year. So still got a lot of work to go through. I like the Polanco signing, solid hitter who is very good in the clutch and late in games. Yeah, high leverage guy. Still want them to get a guy like O'Hearn. That would be a good compliment to help play first base. But again, I'm not entirely sure just because Polanco is better from the left side. I feel like now they might be more inclined to get a right-handed bat than a left-handed bat, at least for first base. But we'll see in that regard. Hopefully he can handle the big market. I hope so as well. Would be shocked if Vientos isn't a Padre. I don't know how much Vientos would be an intriguing piece for the Padres. I mean, maybe he is because at least he's got control and he's a big league player and he could DH for them. But the Mets definitely need to explore the trade market with San Diego because if you could get a Mason Miller, Adrian Moron, or Jason Adams, another reliever I like, they have a plethora of options in that bullpen to help strengthen the team. To me, if you land a package of Mason Miller and Nick Pivetta, that is the best possible route you could go. I don't know what it would cost. I think because Pivetta's contract jumped up to nearly $20 million this year, I think that would help the argument that the Padres are looking to shed some payroll. You might not have to pay as much, but if you land that package, that would be game changing for the offseason.
100%. The other thing, like I was just kind of looking through fan graphs and looking at splits because we know the Mets over the past couple years have, one of their weaknesses in terms of, pulling the ball, hitting fastballs as well. One of their other weaknesses that we have been talking about, and this has been for years a weakness of them, they couldn't hit lefties. And this is comparing Polanco and Pete Alonso. And listen, before Met fans comment me, no, I am not saying that Jorge Polanco is better than Pete Alonso at baseball. I am just simply giving you the situational facts of how they hit lefties. And this is just going off of last year. But Jorge Polanco, as yeah, was or as a actually, hold on, no, did I look? Okay, no, that was more as a lefty against a right. No, okay, yeah, there we go. I wanted to make sure I got it right. But as a righty versus a lefty, he got 366 at bats, 410 plate appearances, 254. Was it 254 batting average? And then if we go down to the advanced metrics, 254, 321 on base, 481 slugging, and 802 OPS for a WRC plus of 127. While you compare that to Pete Alonso as a with his stats versus lefties, 106 games, 181 plate appearances, 227 batting average. And then we go down here, then 227 average, 309 on base, 420 slugging, 729 OPS, 102 WRC plus. So Jorge Polanco in that type of situational awareness where you're going up against a lefty hitter is a better hitter against lefties than Pete Alonso. Again, I'm not saying that Polanco was better than Pete Alonso, but as we've talked about, in the past couple of years and even throughout this year, the Mets need to be a lot better in terms of situational awareness and how they set up against certain like relievers and certain pitchers. And we know that this team has struggled a lot against lefties. I like the fact that the Mets have brought a guy like Jorge Polanco who's shown that he is a very good hitter against lefty pitchers.
Yeah, just it's really addressing a multitude of needs in that regard because we've complained about needing a DH. We've complained about them not having guys that can hit lefties. We've complained about them not having guys that can hit fastballs. We've complained about them not having enough positional versatility. We've complained about them not having guys that pull the ball. And we've complained about them not having, um, you know, just having another switch hitter. Again, it's just nice to have in the lineup. He checks off so many boxes for this team. Um, it's just a great fit all around. I was a little confused at first with the signing because my impression was, is he going to play the infield? But then I remember, oh yeah, we have a giant hole at DH. So,
Oh, and
um,
I actually even read it wrong because I looked at the wrong one. I looked at versus righties as lefties. His numbers as a lefty against or his numbers versus lefties as a righty are even better. 308 average, 348 OBP, 548 slugging, an 896 OPS, and a 153 WRC plus. So that's a major upgrade at hitting lefties over a guy like Pete Alonso.
yeah, yeah, it's nice to have, um, again, guys that can hit lefties and guys that, and I know Pete Alonso, everyone's going to come from my head that, oh, he was great with runners at scoring position this past year, but Polanco does it too. This is exactly what we need to compete with the Dodgers. Need more of it for sure, though. Thoughts on the idea of Luis Robert? I'm not on board with it. He had another poor year this past year. I get the defense is what it is, but he's injured so often. I'm just not interested at all unless the White Sox are paying down a significant chunk of
Yeah.
that contract. But even then, you're gonna have to give up a legit prospect at that point. So it's like I'm not interested, to be honest with you. I'd rather just trade for a Jake Myers or find someone else on the free agent market to sign and play the outfield, or just give the leash to Carson Bench.
Yeah, I'd be open to Luis Robert because I think if you put him in a new environment and you put him in a new whole type of, like I said, environment with a whole new coaching staff that could look to get the best out of him, I think you could see a revitalized Luis Robert. But like what we were talking about, and the fact that Robert also has $20 million on his contract for this year, I would be willing to take him on if the White Sox would be willing to eat a piece of that contract. But then, like Evan stated, obviously, if the White Sox are going to eat a piece of the contract and take on some money, you're probably going to need to give them a better prospect haul in return. And listen, like I said, I think Robert's potential to be a better player than what he's shown over the past 2-3 years. But and especially like we were talking about earlier in the stream, you want to supplement Lindor and Soto with proven, reliable veterans. And while Robert, I think, has the potential to be that type of player, again, like Murakami, he's a wild card because you don't necessarily know that he's going to get back to that level. It's a huge boom or bust potential. And like I said, I think if the Mets were in a situation where their lineup was deeper, you could take a risk on getting a guy like Luis Robert. Like the Dodgers right now could take a flyer on getting a guy like Luis Robert because they know their lineup is stacked from 1 through 8. So if he doesn't hit, okay, cool. At least he's giving you really good, outfield, defense, center field. But even then, they have Andy Paz, so that Robert wouldn't even make sense. And then even then, if you're taking on the full $20 million of Luis Robert, now that probably slightens the chances for the Mets to land a guy like Cody Bellinger in the outfield as well. And for me, I would rather have Cody Bellinger over Luis Robert, because even though Robert might be the better defender in the outfield and is more of a stereotypical center fielder, I would just rather have the proven bat of Cody Bellinger over the potential of a guy like Luis Robert Jr. And then, like I said, I would have Bellinger in left field and then play Carson Bench in center field. Or if you're more comfortable with playing Bench in left field because you don't think he's ready full time for Major League center field, put Bench in left field and let Bellinger play center field come opening day.
Yeah, and we'll see if a certain someone approves of who's in center field. That's what's most important. I think Stearns really believes in the kids. I don't see them making any more huge signings, big time trades, but I think he plans on utilizing the kids like Tong, Sproat, Bench early on. I think you're 100% right, but the only thing I will push back slightly on is maybe they're going to go out of their comfort zone for Bellinger. I don't know. And I get this feeling personally, I could be wrong. I think Kyle Tucker's going to get a short-term deal, and I think he's going to sign a 3-year deal, 2 or 3-year deal with opt-outs in it. And if that's the case, the Mets are going to be in on it because
100%.
we've seen them get aggressive with Schwarber. We've seen them, be in the market for these guys that are signing these 3-year deals. If Kyle Tucker is signing for a short-term deal, they'll be all over that, and they should be. And if that's the case, then, if he bounces back, then you give him the fat payday. And if not, then you let him walk. And it would be a win-win deal. So we'll see if that ends up happening. That's just my prediction, though, as of now. But yeah, if the Mets, or if Tucker rather signs a short-term deal, the Mets will be in on that. But I do agree that they're going to be heavily active in the trade market mostly.
Oh yeah, 100%. Obviously, like I said, we were talking about it. The fact that the Padres are looking like they're selling. I mean, the fact that they're open to moving Mason Miller after they got him in July at the trade deadline. It's like I think AJ Preller's just bored at this point, and he just wants to flip assets for fun because it's like, and they freaking traded DeVries as well to the A's. One of the top prospects in all of Major League Baseball. So I mean, I guess if they're gonna flip Mason Miller, they're gonna, obviously they're gonna look for a solid return, but it's weird that, and I understand they're going, under major changes right now with the fact that their ownership and the Seidlers are looking to sell that team right now. But it's a weird situation right now over there in San Diego. But yeah, if they could find a way to get like Mason Miller and Nick Pivetta, like we were saying, like that would be a great trade. Obviously, there were the rumors from the Brewers that Peralta's available. The Mets are like Trevor McGill again. If that's a type of trade that you could execute, again, that's a deal that would majorly improve this team. But yeah, also with the fact that if Kyle Tucker's open to taking that type of deal, a short-term deal, like a 3-4 year deal with opt-outs, the Mets 100% need to be all over it. And I'm sure they will be all over it because again, it's like we were saying, like if this is going to be the idea of how to build teams, and you're only going to go after the star tier A level players, then Kyle Tucker is a guy that fits that mold. Now, I know he hasn't had a great season over the prior. Like I said, he didn't have a great year last year. But if you sign to that deal and he has a great year next year, you could go offer him a long-term deal next year because again, that would fit the plan that the Mets are implementing right now, where they're gonna, look to push through their prospects, fill out the rest of the roster with quality depth, and really give the main load of the payroll to those tier A players, like we saw with Soto, like with Skubal, hopefully next year if the Mets do land them. So I do agree with the plan, and it's weird also because we haven't heard anything about Kyle Tucker's his market so far, apart from the fact that he went to the Blue Jays training facilities. Like that's really it. Like we haven't really heard anything about deals or offers being made to him from other teams. It was just that link with the Blue Jays, and that's about it. Like Bellinger, at least we've heard like rumors, okay, that the Mets are interested, the Yankees are interested in him. There's
But
obviously
he wants like a 7-year deal.
yeah. So we've heard a lot more rumors and a lot more rummaging going on through the Cody Bellinger market. Meanwhile, the Kyle Tucker market is just dead right now.
That's why I'm starting to like get this feeling that it's going to be a short-term deal for him. Like I could be very wrong, but that's just the feeling that I have right now. I saw projections on MLB that the contract could be 8 years, 280. Would Stearns look at that? I think he should if that's where he signs, because you're talking about 35 mil a year. but I also don't know if he will be because I think he's reluctant to go, really long term unless it's a really premier talent. I get Kyle Tucker, you could argue is that, but I think the biggest problem is then you're signing a guy that clogs a corner and you don't have a lot of leeway for guys like Benj and these other prospects that are going to come up. Where at least if you sign Bellinger to a long term deal, you can move him around the field a little bit. Listen, I don't agree with that. I would go after Tucker if he's signing this kind of contract personally, but I'm just giving you what I think Stern's mentality would be, which is why I think that if it's a short term deal, they'll be in. If not, I don't think so. And that's what I think. I truthfully think that's the case with Bregman too. If Bregman's market continues to be this dead, because we haven't heard a lot on him,
Yeah.
if he signed a short term deal, don't be surprised if the Mets jump on that because I think that that's another guy that would fit the mold perfectly where you get a guy that plays good defense, could hit in the middle of the order a little bit, give you a good right-handed bat. So I really think the Mets are playing the long game with those two guys above all else.
Yeah, and I still think ideally, like if I'm going to sit here and say who I think the ideal guy that the Mets are going to land out of those big copper free agents, if they do end up landing one of those big time free agents, I still think the most likely candidate is Bellinger, just because I think Stearns likes his versatility, the fact that he could play left, he could play center, he could play first. If you need him to DH, he can also do that. So I think because of the versatility and like we've been seeing, like the fact that Polanco could play first base, he could play DH. I think Stearns will be looking at the fact that Bellinger is very versatile. So that's why I think the Mets ultimately, at least I think they're not that they're the favorite to land him, but I think out of the big time free agents left, the Mets for me, they are the favorite to land him per se. With Tucker, I still get a feeling because we've seen the Blue Jays just shell out money because I mean obviously they gave the 7-year $210 million deal to Dylan Cease. They freaking overpaid Tyler Rogers, and I get that people are like saying, oh look, the Mets again, they missed on a target. Listen, I like Tyler Rogers. He is nowhere near a 3-year $37 million contract for me. Like 12 million a year, that's an overpay for Tyler Rogers. But I get the Blue Jays are in a position where they can overpay for a guy like Tyler Rogers because they were literally two outs away from a World Series. So the fact that the Blue Jays have already dished out this level of money, I think they would be more inclined to just give Kyle Tucker his payday. So I would still say for me, I think that he ends up with the Toronto Blue Jays. But like we were saying, if Tucker is open to that short term deal with opt outs, Stearns has to be all over that. But like I said, for now, I think out of the top tier free agents left, I think it's more likely that the Mets end up with Bellinger than like Tucker or Bregman per se. But that could change depending on how the markets fare out for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, 100%. It really depends on how those markets go because I mean we saw it with Alonso last year. They waited until the market was completely died out for Alonso, and they got him when they did. Sorry. Peralta and McGill next. We'll see. I would like that a lot. I need to just give me a minute. Read this comment as we go through.
Yeah, look at them from Ryan Freeney. I want Scooble, but we should wait till he hits free agency. Learn from the Mello trade. F. Luis Robert. The Scooble trade is interesting because we obviously heard rumors, and obviously Noel McLean is a guy that the Mets have already said that he's not available to trade, and that's 100% the right move because Scooble only has one more year left before he hits free agency, though, so there's no reason to trade Noel McLean. But the weird thing that I heard, and this came out, I believe it was from John Heyman or it was from Ken Rosenthal, or maybe it might have been even from Will Salmon. I don't know. There's so many news and rumors coming out now that's like it's so hard to keep up with. But we've heard that the Mets might even be interested in trading a guy like Carson Benj away in that deal. So we'll see what happens. But to me, if the Mets are going to trade for Scooble, one, you have to make sure that you're building a roster that's good enough to compete because even if you sign Scooble, and I think even if the Mets do sign Scooble, I think they'll become the favorites to keep him just because I don't think Steve Cohen's going to let Stearns trade away some prospects and then end up losing him and being outbid by the Dodgers. Like I think that the Mets will end up. Obviously, they're not going to extend him right away. He's going to go to free agency. He's going to do his thing, but I still think the Mets will land him. But if the Mets are in a position where their team they're not comfortable yet to where they feel that their team is like fully ready to compete, maybe you don't trade for a guy like Scooble. You wait till free agency next year. But obviously, that's also a dangerous game because if the Dodgers do end up trading for him, which we've even heard that the Dodgers right now are interested in moving a guy like Tyler Glasnow, to which if they fucking move Tyler Glasnow, they're going to get Tyreek Scooble because the Dodgers are just insane at freaking doing all this shit, flipping assets and getting star players. So that's obviously a dangerous game that you could play because, like I said, if Scooble ends up with the Dodgers, they'll obviously have the leg up on negotiations. And probably at that point, he's going to sign long term with the Dodgers. So it just depends because at the end of the day, you want to be smart because this is not just about building a team that's good enough to compete for 1 year. It's about sustainability. So if you feel that the team is good enough this year and you feel comfortable that you're going to be the favorite to sign Tyler Scoople, then by all means, go out and trade assets for him and get him on this team next year. Because if he's on this team next year, the Mets' chances of winning a championship next year goes up like by that much. But if Stearns and Cohen feel that the team is not 100% there yet to where they're comfortable flipping those assets, then yes, wait till next year to get them in free agency. But obviously, like I said, that's obviously a dangerous game because if the Dodgers land them, they'll probably become the favorite to re-sign them.
Yeah, and like we also mentioned that now you have to win on these A-tier players. Like that's really the most important thing from here on out is if you're going to play this game, you have to. I love Pete as much as anyone, and I was pissed when he walked, but it's time to move on. The sun still rises, and this signing is a decent start. Exactly. And at the end of the day, you could sit. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. You could sit here and be pissed about it. You could cry about it, whatever. But at the end of the day, we're going to be at the ballpark next year. At the end of the day, we're going to be running the Shake Shack, whether the Polar Burger's not there anymore. So we're going to be running the Shake Shack, going to be running to get the semen shakes, and we're going to have a great time either way. And it is what it is. And now we just, again, I'm not going to sit here and convince anyone. You have to trust Stearns. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what he's doing is right or wrong. I don't know. But all we could do at this point is sit back and hope he's doing his job right. That's all we can do. I don't know what else I could say. I could sit here and come on here and cry and be pissed off, or I could talk about shit that could actually happen. You guys tell me what you want us to do. So I'm not going to sit here and do that personally. What about trading for a guy like Brenton Doyle? I'm not a fan of Doyle personally. I think there's a lot of holes in his game. Pause. But yeah, that's just my opinion. I don't know if you disagree, Matt, but
yeah, listen, I think Doyle's a decent player. Obviously, he's a very good defensive center fielder. Don't get me wrong. His offense definitely did take a step back next year. I know part of it was because, and I was watching Wardy's video that he was covering Brendan Doyle, and he mentioned that it was unfortunate last year, but before the season started, him and his wife had a miscarriage. So obviously that sucks, and prayers to Doyle and to his wife and to his family. And that always, if that happens before a season, that's obviously going to fuck with somebody's head because that is just a terrible thing to happen. So listen, if they trade for Brenton Doyle, listen, I'm going to give him my full support. I'm going to want him to do well. But Brenton Doyle wouldn't be my number one option per se. Obviously, obviously Jake Mars is available. That's a guy who the Mets could target to get center field. Obviously, like I said, they could sign Bellinger. They could give Carson Benj a chance there at center field as well. So, listen, I think Doyle has the potential to be a decent role player for this team. He wouldn't be my personal favorite.
Yeah, I worry about how his hitting was just course field mostly. Like that's really the thing. I'm more concerned about pitching with Suarez going to the Braves and Rogers to the Blue Jays. The options are reducing. Again, I'm personally not going to sit here and worry until there's a reason to, because you still have McGill on the market to trade for. You still have Mason Miller. I mean, the entire Padres bullpen's probably available. They have to land one of those guys, so that's the bottom line. If they don't, then I'm going to be right there with you if Dickie Lovelady's coming into the game in the 7th inning. So, and we're trying to bridge with Devin Williams, but
Yeah, I mean, you could even another option because obviously the Cardinals are looking to sell, and if the Mets are going to land a guy like Wilson Contreras, and even they've been linked to Lars Nootbaar, even though I'm not too big of a fan of Nootbaar, and I don't really want the Mets to trade for him. But if you're going to get a package deal, and you're obviously going to get a position player and a reliever, and obviously we've heard the news that because obviously going to next year, the Mets, their two lefties are going to be Brooks Lee and AJ Minter, and we've kind of heard from Mendoza that Minter's probably not going to be 100% ready for opening day. But if the Mets are looking for another lefty reliever, Jojo Romero is another guy that you could go after in that Cardinals bullpen who was a lefty, and he had a decent year last year and has pretty good stuff. So there's options out there to trade. Obviously, like I said, free agency wise, it's dwindling because the only really guy that's left out there is Pete Fairbanks, and I'm not sure what he's looking for in a contract wise because obviously, if he's looking for more than a 3-year deal, we know that Stearns is probably not going to give out a 3-year deal longer than that. So probably, like I said, for me, what's most likely to happen if the Mets are going to get bullpen additions, which they still need to, it's going to go through the trade market. And obviously, with all the names that they've been linked to, it's more likely than not that they're going to get their relievers through the trade market.
Yeah, and it comes down to it. Like I'd be okay with Fairbanks. I'm not crazy about it because the guy has such a long injury history and problems with pitching in cold weather. Like I don't know. Polanco was huge for the Mariners in the playoffs last year. He was their postseason hero, and Mariners fans want him back. I heard before the Mets stepped in. Yeah, definitely a lot of praise there from the Mariners fans about him. And they were horrible with runners at scoring position. Polanco helps that. Yep, 100%. Would you give Fairbanks the Helsley contract that he got with the Orioles? That's probably what he's looking to get. I just worry about injuries with him. Like that's the biggest problem. I don't mind him as a pitcher, but I just worry about that.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like JM brought up, he does have that problem where he gets the numbness in his fingers, especially in cold weather. So that is another concern.
Yeah.
It's just again, it depends on what type of contract he's looking for, and it also depends what teams are looking for in return for their relievers on the trade market. So if something makes more sense than others, then sure, obviously Pete Fairbanks, I would be fine with him being a reliever. But right now, I'm a lot more intrigued with the guys being named on the trade market in terms of relievers than just giving Pete Fairbanks a deal. But if they do end up signing Pete Fairbanks, I won't mind it because I still think Pete Fairbanks is a decent reliever.
Polanco is a negative defender who hits low 20 home runs. Run prevention. Replacing Pete Nimmo's 217 RBIs. What are we doing? They're getting a real DH, and they are building a deeper team. If this is the roster on opening day, I'll be right there with you, Sean. But opening day is not tomorrow. It is in a couple months. So let's wait and see. And again, they're not going to exactly replace one for one Pete Alonso's production with Contreras or whoever. It's about making the team deeper. So let's see. And yes, aren't we all going to miss the polar burgers? But unfortunately, it is time to move on.
Can't shoot out a polar bear anymore.
No, we're not shooting out a polar bear for when he hits 500 home runs. He's not doing anything to Andrew's dog anymore. Andrew's dog is safe. No more polar bear. Must be the only Met fan that had zero attachment to Pete Alonso. Listen, I love Pete Alonso, but I'm not going to sit here and I'm sorry, but I mourned it last year when the writing was on the wall that this day would come. Like, I'm at a point where it is what it is and have to move on. At the end of the day, I care more about the logo on the front than the name on the back. And we could be upset about it. We could miss Pete Alonso. But at the end of the day, it's a business and this team has a lot of work to do because even if they kept Pete Alonso, you're increasing the payroll and you still have a million other holes to fill. Pause. It is one guy, though. It's one guy.
Yeah, no. Listen, and I get that people are gonna have favorite players. Like, I'm not saying that you can't have a favorite player. And listen, for me, I like certain players more than others. I think we all do, and I think that's natural as a fan. But for me, I've gotten to a point where I have not seen a championship yet. I know Evan's got two, courtesy of the Eagles. Obviously, jealous that he's at least got something to celebrate. But I want a championship. And we've obviously seen, like, with our hockey team, we've seen them prioritize, some players over the other, and that's made the team a lot worse. And for me, I like this approach to where David Stern is saying, look, this has not worked out. I get that the fans like this player, but at the end of the day, do you want to win a World Series, or do you want to watch a player that you like hit home runs? Like, to me, I would rather watch a championship parade. I would rather see the Mets celebrating on City Field on the City Field with them, jumping around and enjoying that the fact that they won a freaking World Series. Like that's what I and listen, I like Pete Alonso. I love Pete Alonso. He was a great Met, but it was time to move on. I want to win a championship at the end of the day. And listen, I get that it's no guarantee that this type of idea and philosophy is going to work, but like I said before at the start of the stream, we know that this core with Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil, we know this since 2019. This has not worked. I would rather go in the direction to where, yes, there is the unknown, and the unknown might be scary to some people, but I'd rather go with something that's unknown and has a shot at winning a World Series than going back to an approach which we know is probably not good enough to win a World Series. That's just me personally.
And like Carson has repeated time and time again on his show, they made their own bed here. They did. That you don't win baseball games, this is what's going to happen. And again, I get we get attached to players. I get we love certain players. Get we loved wearing our polar bear hats, going down to get the polar bear burgers. But at the end of the day, I care more about the Mets as a team than one guy. And if one guy is the difference that much, if they were a Pete Alonso away from being a championship team, I'd say, yeah, they should have given him that contract, but they're not. That's the difference.
Yeah. And even then, because we went through it last stream, like people say, oh, but the homegrown Mets. Listen, I don't care about homegrown players. Yeah, sure. It's nice to have a team that's developed through your own farm system, but at the end of the day, I want to win. And we went through it last stream. Like I said, the Dodgers on their team have like 4, 5, 6 guys who are homegrown, with Will Smith only being their prominent star out of their homegrown players. You look at the rest of their core. What's it called? Mookie Betts traded and extended for. Freddie Freeman signed in free agency. Otani signed in free agency. Teoscar Hernandez signed in free agency. Tyler Glasnow traded for. Yamamoto, they signed. Blake Snell, they signed. They signed all these guys. And listen, like I said, I don't care where these players come from. They could come from within the system. They could come from Cuba. They could come from fucking Mars. I don't give a shit. Just get me good enough ball players that are good enough to win a championship. That's all I care about.
Yeah, same here. And that's really what matters the most. Nimmo had his 92 RBIs, could be a real DH. The problem is he had 5 years left on the contract. And you had to move him before it becomes too much of an albatross. If Nimmo had 2 or 3 years left, he would still be a Met.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the bottom line, but that's not the case. So, at the end of the day, this is what it is. Maybe DH Polanco for 2 years and Soto becomes the DH. We'll see if that's the plan. I think that, again, for right now, there's just let's add a guy with positional versatility, but he's primarily the DH. So,
yeah, and obviously there's going to be more moving pieces from this roster because, like we were talking about, obviously with this trade, the fact that Polanco is going to play first base and he's going to play DH, that basically makes Mark Vientos irrelevant to this roster, and he pretty much was already irrelevant because the guy just doesn't have a position regardless. And like I said, the fact that Polanco's going to DH now, that was Vientos' only spot to possibly playing. So he's going to be shipped out in a future deal. Not sure what trade's going to be. Maybe it's to San Diego. Maybe it's to St. Louis. We'll find out. And I just hope that because it has to happen, right? Jeff McNeil has to be traded. Like, there's no way out of all the players left from the 2019 roster that Jeff McNeil is going to be the sole survivor of that team. It just there's no possible way it could happen. And I get that his contract is kind of tough to move with 1 year and $50 million left, but I mean, like, come on, just somebody trade for Jeff McNeil.
How has he survived this? It's a mystery to me. Um, Not gonna lie, for me, Alonso leaving hurt, and maybe I'm biased, but the bat was killer and could have been a DH down the road. Uh, do was it was consistent, but it is what it is. Listen, I get it, but at the end of the day, that paying him $31 million and limiting your roster flexibility and being top heavy, you have a choice. Do you want to be top heavy or do you want a team? We've tried this how many years with Alonso being a top heavy team? Doesn't work.
And like the point that Carson brought up with the team making, yeah, that was a comment that I was laughing at. But this was the point that Carson was making, that the team made their bet, because listen, if the Mets did not collapse in 2021, if they made a deep run in 2022 and they won the division, if they made the playoffs in 2023, if they made the playoffs this year in 2025 and made a deep run, maybe a guy like Pete Alonso will be back. Maybe these core guys would be back. But at the end of the day, when you don't have success and you don't produce results and you don't win baseball games, accountability happens. And you have to accept that. Players have to accept that, and fans have to accept that. I know maybe a certain hockey team doesn't accept what's it called accountability, but over here with the Mets, we want accountability and we want to win. So you know what? You don't win baseball games. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Players move on, and you have to move on in another direction. It is what it is.
Yeah. And that's just the bottom line. And again, I would rather try change and lose with change, but at least I know I took the chance versus losing and running things back when you know it doesn't work. That was the choice, and this is what they're opting to. And I respect that Stearns is willing to be the one to do it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
because he's put a huge target on his back. Like, the guy's the most hated person in New York right now, and that's without a doubt. But at the end of the day, like, if you're a general manager, if you're a president of baseball operations, you can't worry about what the fans think of you or what the moves that you're going to make. At the end of the day, you have to make the moves in which you believe are going to make the team better. And listen, like I said, Stearns is taking a huge risk right now, because if this doesn't work, like I said, he's putting himself in a position where all the good that he's done with Milwaukee will get erased from what happens if the Mets, like, fall flat on their face. And it could see him not land another job in Major League Baseball for a long time, similar to what we saw, with Billy Epler and stuff. But if it works, then he's going to be looked as a genius, and we're all going to be celebrating. But listen, like I said, and this is the point, and I like this, and you always talk about it as well, that whenever we talk about in terms of players, coaches, general managers, we always want to put these people in a spot where there's no more excuses. Because at the end of the day, you want a clean slate and you want the opportunity to do it your way. David Stearns, this is your team, it's your canvas. Go make the painting, because now you have no more excuses. The guys that you wanted to get rid of, they're gone. Obviously, there are a couple more players that you still want to get rid of, like a guy like Jeff McNeil, but the main guys that are clogging up the payroll, they're all gone. It's your team. There's no more excuses. If you succeed, great. If you fail, then you're gonna get fired. It is how it is.
yeah, he's either gonna keep this shit as shit, or he's gonna turn this shit pile of shit into a Picasso. We're gonna find out. Um, Last comment I'll read before we wrap things up. You're right. 5 to 9 felt like automatic outs. I want a roster that could produce. Semi and Polanco would help with that. Exactly. And that's really what it comes down to. And again, it's about infusing the young talent. And then now you have to, and like I keep saying, I've said it, I don't know how many times this episode, but I'm going to say it again. You have to be the highest bidder on these A tier players now in free agency. Because if you're not, then I don't know what we're doing by budgeting on these 2 or 3 year deals. Because it's one thing if these guys sign with the Dodgers because they're chasing a ring, but no excuse to not be the highest bidder when Scooble hits the market next year. No excuse to not be the highest bidder when any of these top guys hit the market. And now it's about having those guys lead the way and supplementing it with the Polancos, the Seaman Shakes, and the young talent.
Yep, that's it.
So we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching this breaking news episode. Of course, if there's more breaking news, we'll go live. I don't know when the next regular podcast episode will be, to be determined. There's just been so much news going on that's just been chaotic to try and figure anything out. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in and watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live next. And we'll see you guys in the next one.